Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Welcome back to Tampa, Florida, home of Super Bowl 55. We've been talking to you all weekend about the state of Florida, the state of being open, the state of freedom, and experiencing it here down in the Sunshine State. The man responsible for that is Governor Ron DeSantis, in large part keeping this state open, and I'm pleased to be joined now by the governor himself. Governor DeSantis, good to have you.
Welcome to Tampa Bay and welcome to the great state of Florida.
Thank you. Now, I want to point out to the audience something. When he says he's a Bucs fan, he's not being a typical politician, running to the front, taking the popular position. You're from this area. You grew up a Bucs fan?
Yeah, so when they had the orange uniforms, when they were kind of the joke of the NFL, played at the old sombrero, the visiting team would usually have more fans than we would have, so I was a supporter. And, we were able to win a Super Bowl in 2003, which was great, but we've had some lean years, and so to be able to be here and hosting the Super Bowl with the Bucs in it, with Tom Brady at the helm, there's a lot of excitement here in the Tampa Bay area.
Absolutely. I've made the case, by the way, to bring back those creamsicle uniforms. I think they're beautiful. I'm going to get your prediction in just a moment. But let's talk about being open. I've experienced it. I've been out and about in Tampa this entire weekend. Your state's been open. This isn't the first championship you've hosted, not the first big event you've hosted. Tell me about you opening this state up and what it's meant for the economy and whether or not it's been a success.
Well, you look around the country, and they still are debating whether schools should be open. We've had schools open the whole year. They talk about whether businesses should be open. Every business in Florida has a right to operate. They talk about all these people unemployed. In Florida, every single person has a right to earn a living. And our unemployment rate is lower than the national average, even though we're so tourism dependent, and that market hasn't recovered at all. Our COVID, though, we have less COVID mortality per capita than the national average. 25 states are higher. So the lockdowns don't work on their own, but they cause catastrophic damage to society. So what we've been able to do is other states have tried to lock people down. We've tried to lift people up. And I'll tell you, every time I go out, someone will come up to me and say, my kid wasn't doing well, thank you for getting him back in school. Or my business would have failed, thank you for saving us. Or I would have lost my job. Those effects are going to make this state so strong going forward. And I think had we tried a different course that has not worked in other places, I think it takes years and years to be able to recover from the damage.
Maybe decades.
Yeah.
Maybe decades, in fact. The data is clear. It's come in, hospitalizations, transmissions, mortality, combined with the economics of being open. But then that leads me to this. And I don't know if there's an easy answer to this question, but outside of a few places, the national media has largely used you as a point of criticism while celebrating governors like Andrew Cuomo. Why do you think that is in the face of all that evidence?
Well, look, they have a partisan agenda, and I think it was an election year. They did not want the president to carry Florida. I think the fact that the president endorsed me when I ran for governor, means that they want to do that. So they had a narrative. And their narrative is whatever that helps them advance their political. It doesn't matter about the facts. They don't care about the facts. In fact, they will ignore facts that are inconvenient for their narrative and even concoct conspiracy theories as to why the facts aren't doing it. So I think they've done a horrible job with what they've done. But here's the thing. People aren't buying it because people vote with their feet, and they are flooding into the state. We have investment coming in. We have people buying homes like never before. We have the fact that we have schools open. People are leaving in every corner of the state just because we have schools. We've had sports going on the whole time. I have parents who have moved their kids to Florida because they didn't want to miss football season, which they would have in some of these lockdown states. And so I think that there's the narratives that some of the corporate elite media try to sell. People don't buy it, and this is a perfect example, because if people bought their narratives, you'd have people leaving here to go to these states that are supposedly doing so well.
You've talked about voting with their feet. By the way, are you going to try to translate those into votes for presidency? Are you going to run for president in 2024?
Well, we got a great governor's election in 2022, which will be very important for our state. And quite frankly, I think, it gives us the ability to keep the momentum going. So that's what we're focused on.
Focused on governorship.
Yep.
But is that a no to running for president?
We have 2022 to worry about.
All right, I want to ask you about this. You do have a bill you want to put forward. Everyone, I don't know if this is limited to conservatives, but free speech loving individuals out there are concerned about not necessarily the government at this time, but big corporations, big tech companies suppressing speech, seemingly on one side of the aisle, and you have a bill you're putting forward to try to rein that back in. Would you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, one, we want to protect people's data privacy, which these big companies realize that they're not interfering in our elections by deplatforming candidates and silencing people they disagree with. But then we also, the broader censorship and deplatforming of society. I mean, they have the ability to wipe you off the map online. And it's not just someone that may be making comments. People's businesses are linked to being able to reach people through these platforms. You have payment processing, email, text message. We've seen they've wiped that out for people that they haven't liked. That's very, very ominous. They're acting as monopolies that are exerting more power than the monopolies at the turn of the 20th century, like Standard Oil. And so they should not have this much authority over American life. And I think our bill really empowers individuals. If they're not following their own terms of service, if they're targeting you because of your viewpoint, well, that's effectively a consumer fraud. And so we're allowing the ability for individuals to be able to sue and the attorney general to be able to bring suits.
If you're deplatformed during an election cycle and running for office?
That's anybody.
Anyone.
Anybody. I mean, because what they do is they play games with these terms of service. They don't implement it fairly, because just think about it. They will deplatform a conservative, but then they'll let the Ayatollah Khamenei spout all this hate about Israel and Jews. So that type of inconsistency, I think, gives rise to a potential cause of action to protect individual Floridians' rights.
No doubt. And I think almost any conservative out there would share your concern culturally, your concern over the spirit of free speech, but you're a Republican, you have conservative values. It's traditionally been a concern for Republicans that the government step in the way of a private industry when it comes to free speech. I heard you say Standard Oil, reference Standard Oil. Are you talking about it potentially breaking up the big companies, the big tech companies? How do we balance this government and free speech against a private company?
So here's the thing. We talked about lockdowns and all this, okay, and in Florida's success being open. Big tech censored criticisms of lockdowns early in the pandemic. And just imagine if we had had a robust debate on that. Some of those states that are really dystopias now, maybe they would have chose differently. But if you put an article criticizing, they would take it down. It was blatant censorship, and I think it's contributed to a lot of lives being lost. And so this is a fundamental thing. So being able to structure the public square, and what we're doing is we're not intervening government to have less speech. We're trying to structure it to have more speech. And I think that's a fundamental difference as to how other people have wanted to use the government in the past. In terms of breaking them up, obviously the state of Florida can't do that, but they are exerting more power, just a handful of companies, than other industries that have been broken up in the past. And so I think an antitrust perspective at the federal level absolutely needs to be part of this conversation.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We know the cost. The cost has actually come in the toll of human lives when you're suppressing the truth. We know that when it comes to COVID. We know what this state has done. We've talked about the economy. Now let's bring this home. Do you want to endorse the creamsicle uniforms, or do you want to go ahead and give me your Super Bowl prediction?
No,
you're going to surprise me and pick the Chiefs?
No. So here's the thing. When we hosted it in Miami last year, I picked the Chiefs publicly before. I said Mahomes is the best player in the league. They're going to win. And I think the point spread I got was pretty close. And I told the Governor Parsons in Missouri, we welcome the Chiefs again, but we welcome them with a little more hesitancy and, quite frankly, overt partisanship, because we are rooting for the Bucs. But I'm also picking the Bucs. I think that they're going to win. I remember the game in Week 12. Kansas City outplayed us. That's fine. But they're clicking now. The defense is playing a lot better. Tom Brady's really taken the reins in terms of strategy. So I think they're going to do it. I think it'll be Tom Brady's 7th Super Bowl. And I think it'll be one of the great achievements in NFL history if he can get that done.
Can't wait to see if your prognostication skills are on point tonight. Before we go, let's bring this full circle. We're going to do news and sports put together. I want to bring that conversation you and I were having just over there. We've talked on this program about states being shut down, places like California. Look, high school kids in California, they haven't had a football season. Some of these kids tried to sign with colleges in this last week. It was National Signing Day. They couldn't, because they did not have a senior season to showcase any of their talents. You were telling me, and in fact, that has been another draw to the state of Florida. Yeah,
so in fact, the guy that won Mr. Football in Florida is a quarterback up in Northwest Florida, Niceville High School. He had been more of a baseball player. He had played football, but then he really had a tremendous year, and now is able to get scholarship offers. Had we had sports shut down, that would have never happened. And so that's just one example, but you multiply that across this country, thousands and thousands and thousands of kids whose dreams were simply cut short. In Florida, we said, we're standing by your dreams. We're going to be there for you. You have every right to play. If you don't want to, don't do it. But we're not going to take that away. We had successful youth sports seasons so far. We're going to keep it going.
Mental health, future prospects, businesses and economy. It is great to see people living as normal life as they can. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's great to see a state opened up. Ron
Absolutely.
DeSantis.
Thank you.
All right.